coach. But I guess everybody wants to start and talk about what happened on Saturday night. And as T-Bob alluded to inside of headlines, it was very much anticipated by seemingly the entire fan base going in to the weekend, whether it was here on Off the Bench getting feedback from listeners or just listening to the media throughout the week, looking on social media. LSU had not a prayer in this game from the public standpoint. And once the thing kicked off, it became more evident that it just wasn't going to happen for LSU that day. They were outmanned as much as they have been in this rivalry since I can remember. I mean, I gave you a stat inside of headlines. They've played this game 85 times throughout the history of this matchup. They started playing this game in 1895, and Alabama put up the highest point total in the history of the matchup, and they could have done more. They scored on every possession in the first half. They had guys running wide open. It looked like pregame warm-ups for Devontae Smith on his first 2 touchdowns. I mean, they didn't have a player in sight from in a 10-yard radius of the best college football player in the game right now. I don't know. They have more issues than what we see on the field. It is clear, it's evident that they've got big problems at LSU football right now. Whether you see the head coach reacting on the sideline, slamming his headset down at the feet of the assistant coach that he handpicked and brought in the offseason and pays $2.3 million annually to run his defense, and there's not even the communication that you can get the best defensive back in college football and Derek Stingley Jr. guarding Devontae Smith, who's the best wide receiver. You can't do that for 2 quarters. I look at the recruiting class, and I see one offensive lineman. I see it decorated with ornaments of defensive backs and wide receivers and skill position players, where if you bring this class in as it is right now, as it's constructed today, it is only going to be what you saw continuously, what you saw last weekend for the next recruiting cycle, for the next 4 years. If you don't get offensive linemen and defensive linemen that can create some type of competition within this game, Nick Saban and Alabama will continue to run away with this matchup because look at the offensive line. I mean, look at what LSU and Alabama, look at that game in the trenches. LSU did not have a chance on Saturday night to compete.
No, and the line's kind of interesting because early on they actually held up early on in terms of winning their one-on-one blocks. But again, they got completely confused and out-schemed by the exact same looks that Texas A&M did. You know, last week I kind of posited this notion Texas A&M was doing a really good job of getting LSU to slide one way and then bringing pressure from the other side. And I was wondering, had they keyed in on something? Had they learned an LSU rule that could trigger that slide that they knew how to manipulate and take advantage of? I almost feel that is assuredly the case now. Because you saw it again this game. Alabama walking 6 up on the line, kind of that, you walk 6 up, bring 4 from all different sorts of direction, make the O-line sort it out. Again, LSU was sliding, wasting resources. I mean, there's some pictures on my Twitter if you want to go check them out of free runners. Like one time you kept 7 people in protection. Alabama rushed 5, and you have a free runner right in TJ Finley's face. So they started all right. Then they started to fall apart schematically. Then they started to fall apart where sometimes the scheme was correct, but a player had a missed assignment where they made a mental mistake and missed their guy. And then they just started to get their ass kicked one-on-one. And it should come as no surprise that, again, freshman quarterback success rates are going to be tied directly to the success of the offensive line. That when the O-line started to struggle, then TJ Finley's night went to hell. The offensive night went to hell as well. So the offensive problems are apparent. And they definitely need more innovation again next season. The stubbornness of this offense and some of its play call selection, and mainly that, the quick zone runs on third down it's reaching borderline absurd territory. But the offense remains the speck in the eye to the plank that is this horrible LSU defense. they were so hopelessly out-schemed this game. Because nobody, for whatever reason, whether Coach Pelini couldn't teach it or the players can't get it, because now they are now running this incredibly simplified, just single high man scheme, sometimes two high man scheme. This uber simple base man scheme that they've taken to running makes them so easy to manipulate, especially with pre-snap movement. If you watch this Alabama game closely, you'll see a lot of the same offensive concepts that you saw out of like Mizzou earlier in this season, or even like when you watch the Chiefs on Sunday, right, where they have a lot of crisscrossing movement before the snap, right? You saw a ton of Devontae Smith going on that jet sweep. Now, obviously, he doesn't always get the ball. That's just to get you moving in two different directions. And what it ideally wants you to get to is just get you to take one false step, right? It wants you to freeze you when the ball is snapped, so you can't make that read, then you're behind the play. They had LSU sprinting around like a chicken with its head cut off, trying to stay on their man with this pre-snap motion. And then it wasn't just pre-snap; it continued after the snap as well. You're watching them cross guys up through the secondary and watching secondary members run into each other. Nobody's passing anything off. It's just disastrous all around. And so when you combined a scheme that is easy to manipulate, that is then going against an elite coaching staff with better players, well, that's how you end up with a terrible outcome that you saw on Saturday. And look, the first, like I said, there's simply no defending the scheme this year. The first touchdown to Devontae Smith, and the second for that matter, is a great example where Flott and Stingley take each other out of the play with the routes. And I want to talk to Derek Stingley Sr. about this because I'm wondering, like, should they be at different depths because they're at the same depth, so they're perfectly placed to allowing this to happen? It's just, and again, why was Flott lined up on Smith to begin with? If you're going to go that uber simple with your scheme, why not take the next logical step of saying, like, my old man talks about Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders wouldn't even huddle up with the team. Deion Sanders was just, who's their best receiver? Go cover him, and that's that. Don't worry about run support. Don't worry about anything else. And the fact that LSU didn't do something along those lines with the simple, desperate straits that they already exist in is, again, absurd. And how somebody makes over $2 million a year to make these sort of game plans and calls is absurd. And it's not just Pelini. This is the shadow staff. This is the entire staff. What is going on right now? I mean, where is the evaluation? And I feel bad. I don't want to keep harping on a player, but like the Damone Clark example reinforces a lot of these points where he is just not suited at all to play linebacker right now in the game. Saw him get driven back 15 yards in the end zone by Alex Leatherwood, false, dead feet, catching him 5 yards downfield. I saw Devontae Smith on a long Najee Harris run drive him 10 yards downfield. Devontae Smith. And yet that's the guy that the coaches evaluated in the offseason and said deserved number 18. I don't know what they're seeing on the field. For all the talk of game planning over the summer and all the film that they watch, the game plans leave a ton to be desired. They talk about, the game plans are essentially done. They keep saying that. So the game plans are essentially done from summer. What about everything that you've seen this year? It's just, it's head-scratching top to bottom, and it's really bad.
We'll talk to Verge Osbury next.